In just 5 minutes, we will begin. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Asian Confluence and the U.S. Consulate General, Kolkata, I welcome you to the inaugural session of the two-day conclave, Reimagine and Reconnect Indo-Pacific Synergies through the lens of culture. Culture sustains a society, and through culture, with its many forms, we can create very strong ties and bonds with any people, society, or country. This is because culture works at a very subconscious level. For example, music, painting, or a performance can be experienced and felt, and connection is from the heart, and therefore very strong. A small drop from the ocean of culture can convey more than what 1,000 words can, and therefore each dialogue in this unique conclave will be preceded by a cultural introduction. This is very much in line with the mission of Asian Confluence. Asian Confluence initiates, stimulates, and accelerates revival of the shared civilizational values between the people of India and Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific in order to strengthen our ecological, intellectual, economic, technological, political, and security ties, and thus ensure that we become dependable and involved partners for the growth of all countries in the Indo-Pacific region. To begin with, I invite Shri Sabyasachi Datta, Executive Director of Asian Confluence, for his welcome address. Mr. Sabyasachi Datta.
Very good morning. With your permission, I would like to start with a prayer in an ancient language of Sanskrit from our Upanishads. Sangachatvam, sangadhatvam, samvo manasi janatam, samano mantra samiti samani, samanam manah sahaschitameshaham, samani va akuti samani deva, samanastu vo mano yatha vasuhasati. Shanno astu dipade, shan chatushpade, om shanti 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 hum. It means, may we march forward with a common goal. May we be open-minded and work together in harmony. May our prayers be one. May we belong to one brotherhood. May our aspirations be harmonious. May our minds be in unison. May we strive to reduce disparity. May we be bound in strong fellowship and unity. May all be blessed. The plants, those with no legs, those with 2 legs, those with 4 legs. Peace, peace, peace. A very good morning and greetings from this beautiful city of Kolkata. US Consul General Melinda Pavic, Ambassador Harsh Shringla, Chief G20 Coordinator, who is going to join us through a video address, Consul General of Japan, Nakagawa-san, who's just joining us, Deputy Consul General of Australia, Daniel Sim, Ms. Meenakshi Mishra ji, Regional Head, ICCR, Kolkata. I think we will be joined by the esteemed Consul Generals of Thailand, Nepal, Bangladesh, esteemed members of the Asian Confluence, Ambassador Bhatia, Ambassador Riva Ganguly, Sadhna ji, former Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, Ambassador Shahidul Haq, Ambassador Nakandala, John Winstead, First Secretary US Embassy, Pandit Tanmay Bose, whom we are going to hear in a bit of a time, representatives of the Ministry of External Affairs, Shri Manoj Pandey, who is going to be joining us online, Mr. Adrian Pratt, to all the artists and experts from Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Myanmar, experts from Bhutan, and of course India. Most esteemed dignitaries in the room, colleagues and friends. Wow. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this conclave in this wonderful city of Kolkata on the theme Reimagine and Reconnect, Indo-Pacific seen through the lens of culture. This is being organized by the Asian Confluence in collaboration with the US Consulate Kolkata and is being supported by the ICCR. It's indeed opportune. In this year, we celebrate 75 years of India's freedom, Amrit Mahotsav, and 75 years of US-India relations, diplomatic relations. I thank the US Consulate for this partnership, and we are truly honored by all your presence. Friends, in the next 2 days, we are here in for a treat of meaningful dialogues interspersed with mesmerizing performances, cultural presentations. They say geography is king. This vast maritime expanse of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, what we call Indo-Pacific. This expanse of water connects us, all our nations. It has connected us since time immemorial. Traders have found routes on it. People have crossed and crisscrossed. It is just an effort to just recognize this connect, because this connect is key to the importance. As this importance of this geography grows in the geopolitical context, maybe seen through the lens of culture and history, which this dialogue attempts to do, there could evolve further possibilities for cooperation and action on common issues that engulf us all. The Asian Confluence works in the third space. It's a space beyond diplomacy, beyond transaction, autonomous of government and business, but working in concert with them. A space defined by informality, honesty, openness, mutual respect, to discuss matters of great importance that define our present and will shape our destiny. What better than the medium of arts interspersed with experts of dialogues with experts to celebrate these threads. This conclave has been uniquely designed in a way so that cultural performances can directly influence the content and contours of the conversations. It will juxtapose cultural presentations and policy conversations in the same space with an aim to create an interface between art, culture, and policy. I would also like to inform you that many of these takeaways, these designs have been taken away from a pre-conclave we had done earlier in August in our headquarters in Shillong. In the next 2 days, we will be discussing topics of great importance: trade, connectivity, climate, ecology, migration, peace building. How can policy frameworks in the domain of experts find expression in the art and culture of the communities that will finally impact, How can these subjects, mostly in the domain of experts, find expression in the art of nations? The issues are so overwhelmingly important that we really do need to stretch beyond the silos of disciplines. On that note, this conclave is all about stretching our minds, stretching our intellects, stretching ourselves to see all around. Sound stretched is music. We'll have a lot of it. Movement stretched is dance. I think we will have all of that. Intellect stretched creates meaningful conversations. And together, when we all reach out with our hearts to each other to create new networks, to make new friends, connect with old ones, I think we can stretch ourselves to reimagine and reconnect on what we call the Indo-Pacific. Welcome to one and all, and I really look forward to engaging with you in the next 2 days, making new connections, and on that morning, good morning and welcome. Thank you so much. Welcome.
I now invite Ms. Melinda Pavek, Consul General, U.S. Consulate General, Kolkata, for her remarks.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sabia, for the wonderful, warm introduction and for setting the stage for our wonderful 2 days of events. Distinguished guests and participants, a special warm welcome to everyone from near and far across the Indo-Pacific region. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this unique conclave, which puts people to people and cultural connections at the heart of policy discussions in the Indo-Pacific region. Kolkata is an eminently suitable city to host this kind of unique dialogue. It has masterfully maintained its stature as India's cultural capital into the modern era. Ancient evidence suggests that Kolkata was an established trading hub much before the arrival of the Delhi Sultanate, the Mughals, the Portuguese, the French, and the British. The city is an essential node of economic activity and governance, both at a domestic and an international level, by virtue of its geographical proximity to Southeast Asia and connectivity to the other parts of the Pacific. Kolkata holds even greater promise for the future as new connectivity and supply chain infrastructure is conceived and developed. This is also a city with whom the U.S. Consulate General Kolkata is celebrating 230 years of diplomacy. The relationship dates back to 1792, when the first U.S. President, George Washington, appointed Benjamin Joy as the U.S. Consul to India in Kolkata. We hosted our National Day on November 1st, also celebrating the 75th anniversary of our two countries' formal diplomatic relations, as well as the diplomatic legacy and shared history. Our shared values continue to strengthen our bilateral ties and shape the involvement of our countries globally. As the world's oldest and largest democracies, we remain committed to the preservation and promotion of our shared ideals as we pool our strengths toward addressing key issues at the bilateral, multilateral, regional, and global levels. Along with the world, we are excited to witness India's G20 presidency as it takes over from Indonesia on December 1st. The G20 role will open new opportunities for multilateral global engagements with a focus on sustainable growth and inclusive development. The United States is a proud Indo-Pacific nation. We have maintained and continue to strengthen our long-term commitment to an Indo-Pacific that is free and open, interconnected, prosperous, resilient, and secure. Our commitment is to every corner of the region, from Southeast Asia to Northeast Asia, to South Asia, Oceania, and the Pacific Islands. The Indo-Pacific of today enjoys unprecedented economic ties and represents the world's biggest producers of goods and largest trade markets. More than 50% of the global GDP is now generated by the Indo-Pacific region. From the world's most populous countries, China and India, to the world's smallest populations in the Pacific Island nations, the region is home to a diverse group of around 4.3 billion people, which is more than half of the global population. Over 60% of the world's youth live in the Asia-Pacific region. This translates into more than 750 million young people aged 15 to 24 years. Enhanced prosperity and an energetic, innovative population are critical growth factors, and it is incumbent on us to fortify our historical and geographic ties and move forward together to face the challenges that lay ahead. The revival of the quadrilateral dialogue, which occurred in 2017 on the sidelines of the ASEAN meetings in Manila, was the result of a common US-India vision. The United States, India, Japan, and Australia have been collaborating on developing policy and action-oriented approaches within the Quad framework of functional cooperation across diverse sectors. The shared Quad vision for the Indo-Pacific is one of a free, open, more resilient, more prosperous, better interconnected, and more secure region. This two-day conclave will help us synergize, brainstorm, and collaborate on common interests against the backdrop of political, social, economic, and cultural spaces. Let me expand on each of the 5 core elements of this vision. I believe this same vision is shared by many who are present here today. So first, free and open. We will advance a free and open region by investing in democratic institutions, a free press, and a vibrant civil society, by improving fiscal transparency, by ensuring the region's seas and skies are governed and used according to international law, and by advancing common approaches to critical and emerging technologies, the internet and cyberspace. The second element is interconnected. We will build collective capacity within and beyond the region by deepening our 5 regional treaty alliances with Australia, Japan, the Republic of Korea, the Philippines, and Thailand, by strengthening relationships with leading regional partners, by contributing to an empowered and unified ASEAN, by strengthening the Quad and delivering on its commitments, by supporting India's continued rise and regional leadership, and finally, by expanding the US diplomatic presence, particularly in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. The third element is prosperity. We will develop new approaches to trade that meet high labor and environmental standards, that govern our digital economies and cross-border data flows, that advance resilient and secure supply chains that are diverse, open, and predictable. We will make shared investments in decarbonization and clean energy, and we will close the region's infrastructure gap through the Build Back Better world with G7 partners. The fourth element is resilience. The Indo-Pacific continues to face major transnational challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic inflicted painful human and economic losses. Climate change continues growing more severe as South Asia's glaciers melt and the Pacific Islands battle existential rises in sea levels. We will continue to work with allies and partners to develop 2030 and 2050 targets, strategies, plans, and policies that are consistent with keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius of increase in global temperatures within reach, and to reduce regional vulnerability to the impacts of climate change and environmental degradation, and bolster global health security. And the fifth element and final element is secure. We will continue to bolster Indo-Pacific security by deepening cooperation and enhancing interoperability with allies and partners, and innovating to operate in rapidly evolving threat environments, including space, cyberspace, and critical and emerging technologies. The United States has already provided more than $1 trillion of foreign direct investment into the Indo-Pacific region. The region has told us loud and clear that it wants us to do more. Therefore, the launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, IPEF, in May 2022 is a part of making our intent a reality. IPEF has been endorsed by 13 other countries, including India, and is a US-led framework that allows participating countries to solidify their relationships and engage in crucial economic and trade activities through 4 pillars. Let me explain them briefly. The first pillar relates to connected economies, which entails nations working toward higher standards and rules for digital trade. Building resilient supply chains that in turn constitute resilient economies forms the second pillar to protect countries from the effects of potentially disruptive global occurrences, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. The third IPEF pillar comprises efforts directed at meeting and subsequently exceeding our COP commitments through practical green energy and green infrastructure projects. The fourth and final pillar underscores the importance of fair trade and seeks to create rules targeting corruption reduction while formulating and agreeing on measures for effective taxation. We are working with India and the other IPEF partners to develop the details and tackle these 21st century economic challenges. I am glad that this 2-day conclave will focus on all 4 pillars. Working together with all of you to defend the rules-based order that we've built together over decades helps ensure the region remains and continues to develop in ways that meet our shared vision. A vibrant interconnectedness has prevailed in this region for around 2,000 years, until it was altered by human decisions and activities that had consequences that became a part of our cultural learning and social DNA. But our human brain and its desire for connection has resurrected and renewed convergences between states and peoples through cultural diplomacy, historical research and exploration, multinational companies that fuse the best of our ideas to fill unmet needs with new products, and existential fears that compel us to apply these same innovative brains to address our strategic concerns. That is why I'm excited that this conclave is focused on exchanges between people. Observing, listening, testing, learning, creating, debating, revising, and building. These acts are not only the scientific process, but also the gateway to enhanced, expanded, and improved political and economic relations. They are the path to new paradigms of pedagogy, policy, and research. They are the means of turning alliances, experiences, and imagination into international policies that contribute to the positive development of the now 8 billion people who live on our increasingly small planet and beyond into the ever-expanding universe. I personally witnessed this kind of synergy in action as a part of the West Bengal Tribal Hills Festival in the Himalayan hills earlier this month. My team partnered together with 5 indigenous communities and young leaders from the United States, India, Nepal, and Bangladesh through the US Department of State's Arts Envoy program. The act of conceiving of and creating a multilingual artistic performance within a festival in multiple cities led to a deeper understanding of governments, policies, histories, and the connective and overarching ideals of diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility across peoples and nations. The bonds we formed were deep, strong, respectful, and powerful. We cannot know, especially after the overwhelming experience of the pandemic that gripped us for the past several years, what the next decade will bring. But we do know that we can meet any challenge with certainty if we strengthen our collective capacities, pool our resources, and drive toward outcomes that are in alignment with our shared values. I am so grateful to my team and Asian Confluence for gathering all of us here today. I look forward to participating in the conclave conversations and making new friends over the course of the next 2 days. I hope you all join in shaping this vision toward our collective prosperity and security. Thank you so much for your time today.
for the inaugural address. We are privileged to receive this video address from Mr. Harsh V. Shringla, Chief Coordinator for India's G20 Presidency, former Foreign Secretary, Government of India, and former Ambassador of India to the US. May we have the video address, please?
Dr. Sabyasachi Datta, Consuls General of USA, Japan, and Australia, distinguished participants and friends. Namaskar and good morning. It gives me great pleasure to address this conclave on a theme of interest, namely to reimagine and reconnect Indo-Pacific synergies through the lens of culture. I would like to felicitate Dr. Sabyasachi Datta, Executive Director of the Asian Conference, for taking the initiative to host this important dialogue in collaboration with the US Consulate General in Kolkata. I have had the good fortune to work closely with the Asian Conference in Bangladesh on the successful Nadi Conference and later on important issues including India's Act East policy and the development of our northeastern region. Over the years, the Asian Conference has emerged as a serious and capable organization with a growing body of work that highlights international connections with special domain knowledge and expertise on the northeastern part of our country. Its major initiatives, such as the Third Space, Nadi, Young Scholars Forum, Bamboo Grove, have come in for fulsome appreciation. For India, the Indo-Pacific is not a recent construct. It was the forces of nature, the monsoon winds, for instance, or our maritime and trading history that defined our area of familiarity and convergence. India's great religious traditions, such as Buddhism, spread far and wide in the Indo-Pacific. Some of the oldest and most impressive Hindu temples are found in Vietnam, remnants of the Cham kingdom. 1,000 years ago, maritime expeditions and trading ships from India's greatest coastal empire, the Cholas, voyaged as far east as Sumatra to ancient China, as well as to the Abbasid Empire in what is today Iraq. Another empire, the Pallavas, built a flourishing trade relationship with Southeast Asia. Maritime trade with Africa and with the Gulf states has been a constant of Indian economic life. These experiences are our past as much as they are our future. They determine our concept of the Indo-Pacific. In the 21st century, the interconnectedness of the Indo-Pacific is finally coming into full play. A major factor is the region's emergence as a driver of international trade and well-being. The Indo-Pacific ocean system carries an estimated 65% of world trade and contributes 60% of global GDP. 90% of India's international trade travels on its waters. For us, the rise of China and the imperative for a global rebalancing have added to the mix. A rules-based international order is achievable only with a rules-based Indo-Pacific. India's Indo-Pacific strategy was outlined by Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi in a speech in Singapore in 2018 as the Sagar Doctrine. The word Sagar means ocean in Sanskrit and other Indian languages. The Prime Minister used it as an acronym for security and growth for all in the region. This aspiration depends on securing end-to-end supply chains in the region, avoiding disproportionate dependence on a single country, and ensuring prosperity for all stakeholders. An Indo-Pacific guided by norms and governed by rules, with freedom of navigation, open connectivity, and respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all states, is an article of faith for India. At the East Asia Summit in Bangkok in 2019, Prime Minister Modi took the idea of Sagar further and announced the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. Using this initiative, India plans to support the building of a rules-based regional architecture resting on 7 pillars of maritime security, maritime ecology, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, disaster risk reduction and management, science, technology and academic cooperation, and trade connectivity and maritime transport. India has established itself as an instinctive and unstinted early responder and a credible friend in the Indo-Pacific region. Whether in response to an earthquake in Indonesia or to a cyclone in Mozambique, Indian assistance and an Indian ship have never been far away. In recent years, India has significantly enhanced its engagement in the region. The United States has stated that it views India as a vital partner in efforts to ensure that the Indo-Pacific is a region of peace, stability, and growing prosperity and economic inclusion. India is working closely with its partners to help create and sustain a narrative of democracy, peace, and stability in the region and beyond. The Quad, consisting of India, the United States of America, Australia, and Japan, has been formed based on a common vision of the Indo-Pacific. There is an agreement on several common denominators that the region is one with great potential for trade, being naturally connected by shared waters, shared civilization, and shared values of respecting sovereignty, trust, and freedom for inclusive growth. The theme of the Kolkata conclave on reimagining and reconnecting Indo-Pacific synergies through the lens of culture is very relevant for us. The shared culture, history, and mutual social threads that tie the region with India is also an important component towards fostering regional cooperation. For example, the east and northeastern part of India comprise of a region that is a unique melting pot of diverse culture, language, dance forms, and cuisine. India's cultural ties with Southeast Asia are historic and profound. In Cambodia or Laos, Thailand or Indonesia, Myanmar or Vietnam, the historical and living reminders of India's cultural influence are clearly visible in their art, culture, language, and civilization. Indian religion, political thought, literature, mythology, artistic motifs, and style were absorbed deeply into local culture as greater interaction with the courts of Southeast Asia took place. Buddhism came to Southeast Asia from India in the 3rd century BC when Buddhist monks were sent by the Emperor Ashoka. In medieval times, from the 6th to the 14th century, there existed a great maritime empire based in the Indonesian islands of Java and Sumatra. Many Indian artisans came to work temporarily in the courts and were from Kalinga, which is modern-day Odisha. They helped in building great temples and monuments. Many of the motifs on the walls of Borobudur and Angkor Wat resemble carvings of Konark and other medieval temples of Eastern India. The synergetic culture of Southeast Asia is evident in Buddhism being practiced in Hindu temples in Cambodia, Muslim wedding rituals and dress in Malaysia, which are based on Hindu rituals and attire. Garud, the vehicle of Hindu god Vishnu, is the name of Indonesian airlines, and Naga and Kuber, which are prevalent in both Hindu and Buddhist cultures, can be seen carved in many places. A Mahabharata monument depicting Krishna and Arjun riding a chariot pulled by 11 horses is placed prominently in a park in central Jakarta. Southeast Asia absorbed and retained its past Indian influence in a very distinctive manner over the centuries, and today it has melded into the Southeast Asian culture. In Indonesia's shadow play, involving leather puppets with movable arms and legs on a screen narrating scenes from the Ramayana is very popular even today. It is also a popular art form in Odisha. There was reverse exchange of ideas and artistic techniques in the last century when Rabindranath Tagore traveled to Southeast Asia and brought the art of batik from Indonesia to India and taught it to students in Shantiniketan. The influence of India can also be felt in the food and flavors of Southeast Asia. There are many spices in common between Indian and Southeast Asian foods. Indian herbal medicines also reached Southeast Asia from ancient times and are used even today in many countries. Closer links with the Southeast Asian region is thus a natural outcome for India and its Act East policy. As in the past, India continues to engage closely with countries of this region in various spheres. One of them is the restoration of historic monuments, such as the Ta Prohm in Cambodia, My Son in Vietnam, Wat Phu in Laos, and the Ananda Temple in Myanmar. In historical terms, India's heritage restoration footprint spans over 60 completed projects in 21 countries and 52 ongoing projects in 12 countries. The Kolkata Conclave provides an opportunity for a comprehensive introspection of the Indo-Pacific, specifically from the point of view of shared cultural, historical, and social threads. I am very happy to note that the conference brings together prominent academics and thinkers from different walks of life to provide us with an overview and perspective on the linkages that connect the Indo-Pacific through trade and connectivity, climate and ecology, and migration and peace building. I congratulate the Asian Confluence for taking this initiative and thank all participants of the conclave in advance for their unique and insightful. Thank you. Namaskar.
That was the inaugural address. The conclave has been designed in a way so that cultural performances, installations can directly influence the content and contour of policy conversations. The conclave will juxtapose cultural presentations and policy conversations in the same space with an aim to create an interface between art, culture, and policy space so as to look, feel, and touch beyond the usual spaces that policymakers engage with. Reverberating the sounds and rhythms of the Indo-Pacific is Pandit Tanmay Bose and his team in a short cultural performance. Pandit Tanmay Bose is a well-known percussionist and tabla player, music composer, producer, film actor, and composer. Ladies and gentlemen, sounds and rhythms of the Indo-Pacific.
Good morning, Namaskar. Your Excellency, Madam Pavik, distinguished guests, dignitaries, I welcome you all to this beautiful morning for the India-Pacific confluence. I want to extend my deepest gratitude towards US Consulate, USIS, Mr. Adrian Pratt, Shohini, and other members for giving us yet once again this opportunity to showcase our work for you. India-Pacific region, as you know, is very rich in art, dance, music. Music transcends border, and drumming is the ancient-most language of communication. Here this morning, you are going to hear my students play a small section which I call Drum Dreams, which is a confluence between the big drums and our traditional tabla in the time cycle of 8 beats. I begin with a stotram, a composition of Bharat Ratna Pandit Ravi Shankar in a time cycle of 8 beats. Om Gam 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 Shri Ganesh Brahma Vishnu Mahesh Namo Namo Mata Saraswati Dhagena Dhatit Genatit Raga Tal Surle Namo Namo Sur Nara Muni Guni Jana Namo Namo Bajat Mridanga Veena Mirchang Nirata Karata Brahma Tirukata Ranga Ta Tunga Taka Tunga Tatunga Dig Dig Tunga Ta Tunga Taka Tunga Tatunga Dig Dig Tunga Tatunga 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 Dana Tatunga 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 Din Da Kachun ta ka chun den ta ka chun ta ka chun. They need your blessings. Iraban, Onchit, Archishman, Kornojit, Angira, Shomudip, Pubarun, Shubha. And thanks to you too. Namaskar once again. Have a good day, great day.
Thank you, Panditji, for that wonderful presentation. For this conclave, we have come together from many countries, each country with its own speciality and uniqueness. Each has so much to offer to the rest. The urli, which you see in front of the stage, has been filled with water, which symbolizes a confluence of shared ideas and common goals. And so, to spread the fragrance of our common ideologies, we will offer petals to the water in the urli. And for this, I invite Ms. Melinda Pavik, Sabyasachi Datta, all governing council members of the Asian Confluence, Nagakawa Koichi, Consul General, Consulate General of Japan in Kolkata, Adrian J. Pratt, Director, American Center and Public Affairs Officer, U.S. Consulate General, Kolkata, Mr. John Winstead, First Secretary, U.S. Embassy, New Delhi, Mr. Daniel Sim, Deputy Head of Mission, Australian Consulate General, Kolkata, Andalip Elias, Deputy High Commissioner, Bangladesh, Acharpan Yuva Prapas, Consul General, Royal Thai Consulate General, Kolkata, Ishore Raj Podel, Consul General, Consulate General of Nepal, Kolkata, Shahidul Haq, former Foreign Secretary, Bangladesh, and ICCR Bangabandhu Chair, Sumit Nakandala, Senior Director, Bandaranaike Center for International Studies, Colombo, Sri Lanka, and Pandit Tanmay Bose. Shrimati Meenakshi Mishra ji. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly give us a few minutes to set the stage for our first conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a conversation on cultural threads of the Indo-Pacific. Chairing the session is Mr. Rajiv Bhatia, career diplomat, member Governing Council Asian Confluence, and Distinguished Fellow Gateway House, Mr. Rajiv Bhatia. The speakers are, we have representatives from Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, who will be joining us on Zoom. Melinda Pavik, Consul General, U.S. Consulate General, Kolkata. Nagakawa Koichi, Consulate General of Japan in Kolkata. Daniel Sim, Deputy Head of Mission, Australian Consulate General, Kolkata. Meenakshi Mishra, Director and Zonal Head East of Indian Council for Cultural Relations, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. And to begin with, I request Mr. Sabyasachi Datta, Executive Director of Asian Confluence, to kindly felicitate the chair and our speakers. The stoles or uttarios or angavastrams as they are called in India have batik design on them, and batiks are popular in the entire Southeast Asia, which is why we chose them. And as you heard in the inaugural address, they were chosen by Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, who brought this to India. And I also invite on stage Pandit Tanmay Bose. Pandit Tanmay Bose, we'd like to felicitate you. That was a wonderful performance. Thank you. I now request Mr. Rajiv Bhatia to kindly take over the proceedings of this session.
I hope all of you are having a good time, as good a time as we are having here, present from the beginning of this program. And I would like really to address myself to all of you, in particular Sabyasachi Datta, Executive Director, ASCON, Melinda Pavek, U.S. Consul General, our distinguished panelists here, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. We have had 3 outstanding speeches today at the inaugural session, and they must have stirred up our curiosity about what this event is all about. And this whole question of looking at the Indo-Pacific through the lens of culture. And if there was any doubt left about the basic rationale of this conference, I think the cultural performance this morning was so uplifting that it is a very suitable occasion for us now to begin an in-depth conversation. Now, the only reason I have moved from that chair to here is because a lot of stuff lying there on the small red table, and I thought I'll just make very brief remarks because I regard this as my responsibility to introduce the specific session of this theme. The theme is Cultural Threats of the Indo-Pacific. So if you look at the big elaborate title of the conference and also of this session, only two words need to be remembered: Indo-Pacific and culture. Now, on Indo-Pacific, scholars have been busy writing books after books, papers after papers, essays after essays, op-eds after op-eds, and yet the more we discuss, the more we explore, the more curiosity develops around this concept. We heard both Melinda and Harsh Shringla talking about in great detail, and of course Sabya also talking about the cultural dimensions. I want to make a short point, which is that the Indo-Pacific has multiple dimensions: economic, political, diplomatic, and above all cultural. On the economic side, the importance of Indo-Pacific is clear from the fact that roughly 60% of the GDP of the world is contributed by this region, and that over 64% of the global population lives in this region. So clearly, as we go to other sessions, we will talk about this in detail. On the political dimension, we heard a lot. I don't have to go into that at all, but I would like to quote External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who gave a brilliant speech recently at the Chulalongkorn University in Thailand, and I picked up a particular sentence which I think all of you, especially the young scholars sitting at the end, ought to note. And he said, "The repositioning of the US, the rise of China, as also of India, the greater external engagement of Japan and Australia, the wider interests of South Korea, and indeed the broader outlook of the ASEAN itself have all contributed to this transformation, that is, the increase in salience of the Indo-Pacific." And he adds that some of it is also driven by our collective concerns for the global commons. Now, a word here I think I would like to add is about India's vision of the Indo-Pacific. Indian leaders and Indian officials use often 5 adjectives to define what they want in the Indo-Pacific. I think this is something that we can, consider as a useful takeaway. And the 5 adjectives are free, open, inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous. They have a very strong resonance to what Melinda earlier described as she was talking about their view of the Indo-Pacific. I won't go beyond this, except now to focus on the cultural dimensions. And here I think it is understood, everyone knows, that culture is widely regarded as the enabler of sustainable progress. Cultural economy is a well-known concept in the academia. Cultural heritage is something which is very dear to people, to communities, to nations. And culture in all its richness, at the end of the day, refers to the connectivity between peoples. So when we say culture through various manifestations, we are really talking about how to connect people more closely than they probably are today. And this is where I come to my last point. The focus of this entire 2-day conference with all its attendant activities is to see as to how the third space, namely people who are not in the government and people who are not in business, that is, people that would resemble a majority of people in this hall, how the third space can contribute better to the people-to-people connectivity among nations of the Indo-Pacific. So this is, we bring in the concept of cultural threads, and our intention is really to first, in the first phase, hold an informed conversation among the experts who are seated here before you, and then we will involve all of you, and we will try to finish this by 12 o'clock. Let me introduce the expert panel here. You already, all of you know Melinda Pavek, Consul General of the United States of America. You have already heard her views, and I think we will have a lot to discuss with her. We have Nakagawa Koichi, Consul General of Japan, and it's wonderful to have him here. We have Daniel Sim, who's the Deputy Head of Mission, the Australian Consulate General, again based in Kolkata. And we also have Meenakshi Mishra, who's Director and Zonal Head East of the Indian Council of Cultural Relations. So at this stage, I will now go to my chair and begin a conversation involving the expert panel for the next about 20-25 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Melinda, I think you have to take the first question. You are very clearly fully into this theme, and the very fact that you and your institution has supported and partnered with us, ASCON, clearly shows that you believe in the fundamental significance of what we are trying to do together. But allow me one politico-diplomatic question, because this will set the entire backdrop even more clearly. You traced the emergence of the Indo-Pacific from 2017 in the current phase, and I think from 2019 onwards, when the level was raised first to the foreign ministers and then to the heads of state and government. Indo-Pacific, that is the particular version propounded by the Quad countries, and they are all represented here, that has really become very important part of the foreign policies of all of us and our partners. So in that sense, there are two questions. Do you feel that there is a kind of consensus among the 4 countries of the Quad on the geographical definition of the Indo-Pacific? And second, even if it is not there, does it really matter because there is agreement on the goals? Melinda.
Thank you very much. That's a great question, because actually it's one of the challenges when it comes to working across different countries. Even if you have a shared language, sometimes your definitions of words can be different. And without actually exploring what those words mean and understanding the actual definitions that are being used, it's sometimes hard to know if you're really actually on the same page. When it comes to the Quad, well, I referenced 2017, but actually a lot of the Quad activities go back to 2004 and the Great Tsunami and the humanitarian assistance disaster relief efforts that happened then. And then we sort of went dormant for a while. And of course, thanks to not only the U.S. and Japan, or not only the U.S. and India, but of course, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his initiatives to really emphasize the Indo-Pacific vision, it really came together. But there are differences in how we identify geographically. Of course, I think Japan still defines it, the Indo-Pacific is from Africa through to the US, or through to the Pacific region. The US defines it a little bit more narrowly as more the Indo-Pacific Bay of Bengal area, although of course we recognize that when we're talking about different initiatives, and specifically at tangible levels, we're looking for ways that the four nations will work together and achieve tangible outcomes. So the definitions might vary a little bit, but as you mentioned, I don't know that it has a fundamental issue as long as we recognize what we're working on and we're able to identify tangible outcomes and goals for us to work towards.
Thank you very much. This is the heart and the spirit of a conversation when we can talk frankly, we can recognize the similarity and yet say that there are shades of differences, and I think this comes out very clearly. Let me go to my Japanese friend, continuing that thread for a minute so that clarity comes to our listeners. Japan has had very close relationship with Africa. And you were the first country to develop that extensive cooperation through summit diplomacy. The others came later, China, India, rest of them. So in that sense, your country subscribing to the concept of Indo-Pacific, is your view a bit wider and broader than that of the US? Because you know the Indian Ocean region and eastern and southern shores of Africa very well. Are you closer in terms of definition to India or to the US?
Well, I think it's very close with India and the US. And we're actually, you are talking about the some, actually, today I just want to say some of the, relationship, not only the political and economic, but I just want to say some of the culture matter. Especially, I just want to focus on the culture. And culture is always hold the central and very important position in the Japan and the diplomatic relation, I believe. But this is all over the country, even the relationship between Japan and Africa and the other countries. So people with all the country and Japan are engaged in the common cultural relation and the traditional. For example, between Japan and India, range of the some of shared heritage of the Buddhism to heritage of the Buddhism to similarity in the cuisine, way of the some observing the local festival, etc., and sharing among the commitment to the some ideals of democracy and tolerance, diversity and open-minded society. For, you see, in a good situation, it is easy to pay respect of each other's culture, moral values, history, and lineage. But at present, even the pre-COVID pandemic, in this difficult situation, it is more important to respect each other's, some habits, and of course, make a tight, more good and strong relationship between all the countries, including Africa. So that's why for us, the Quad is very important for the respect of the diversity, I think.
Thank you very much for bringing in the cultural dimensions, and that allows me now to go to my friend from Australia. We know the importance of Australia in the context of the Indo-Pacific. A lot has changed. There was a time, at least a decade back, when the fashionable term was Asia-Pacific. And now, it is getting more and more overtaken by Indo-Pacific. What has happened, particularly if we look at the Australia-India relations, the importance of the people-to-people relations has increased sharply And this is so not just because the number of Indians in Australia is increasing, but also because Australia's diplomacy has become very people-centric. Would you like to share your thoughts on this with our audience?
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So namaskar, and thank you for the chance to offer an Australian viewpoint on this discussion on cultural threads in the Indo-Pacific. So most of you would know that Australia is a modern, diverse, multicultural society of 25 million, and we're home to people of more than 270 different ancestries, and we share common ground with the world through the fact that half of all Australians were born overseas or have a parent who was born overseas. And in terms of your question, I mean, you mentioned people born in India are the second largest overseas born group in Australia. And the Indian diaspora is the fastest growing in Australia. And there are over 975,000 people of Indian descent who claimed Indian ancestry in the 2021 Australian census. So that provides a very good framing, I think, for what you've just said about the importance of our neighbours and people from all around the Indo-Pacific who are part of Australia and thus who we need to represent and express as part of our foreign policy and our engagement around the world. And Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who was born in Malaysia, is one of the 1 million Australians who are from Southeast Asia. And she said in a recent speech that at its core, foreign policy is an expression of national values, national identity, and national interests. So foreign policy and our diplomacy starts with who we are. And part of the Australian story, I think, which also needs to be shared more widely, is Australia's Indigenous heritage of our First Nations people. And they have 60,000 years of spiritual and continuing connection to country. And they are indeed our first traders and diplomats with our Indonesian and Pacific Island neighbours. So one of the things that Australia, through our foreign policy and our diplomatic engagement, is focusing more intently on is an Indigenous approach to our foreign policy, which reflects our identity, our diversity, and embeds First Nations perspectives, experiences, and interests as part of our global engagement. And so let me just go into a couple of aspects of that. The first one is that we're shortly about to appoint our first ambassador for First Nations people, who'll harness the expertise and knowledge of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to inform and enhance Australia's engagement in the Indo-Pacific. And this will include drawing on their knowledge and expertise and practices of sustainable land and oceans management, which will help inform our climate diplomacy and how we should better use and live, I guess, coexist within our environment. And of course, we'll also continue to showcase the rich array and expression of our Indigenous arts and culture and music as well. So one of the things that we'll be doing here in Kolkata that I'm really proud to be able to do, I guess actually announce publicly for the first time today, is that we're sponsoring an Australian Indigenous textiles exhibition called Raajkutir, Dry Season Wind. And this will show at the Indian Museum from mid-December. So it's a textile exhibition by women artists from the Barbara Women's Centre in a remote part of the Northern Territory of Australia. And they've created over 70 screen print designs, many of which will be showing at the Indian Museum. And this is one of the oldest continuously operating Indigenous textiles exhibitions and enterprises that runs in Australia, run by women and for women. And we'll also be bringing two of the textile artists from the Northern Territory to Kolkata in January. And they'll also be visiting some Indian textile artists in West Bengal, in the Sundarbans, in Shantiniketan, and also in Bihar, in Gaya and Muzaffarpur, who are also, there are some amazing communities there which we've been able to visit, who are amazing textile artists. And as you know, every village in India, I think, has textiles artists which have a different specialisation and craft. So we're really glad to be able to have that cultural exchange later this year. I'll leave it at that for the moment, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. As I listened to you, my mind went back to 1980s when I used to serve in Jakarta as Deputy Ambassador. And every time Australia-Indonesia relations will come under stress, Suddenly we will see in the Indonesian media the debate whether Australia is an Asian country. All that has changed. And dear friends, note today that Australian diplomatic representation here has an Asian face. And that is the change. Today, Australia can talk very candidly about the cultural dimension. Thank you very much. Mrs. Misra, I come to you. You represent the Indian Council of Cultural Relations, the cultural arm of the Ministry of External Affairs. We all have, in one fashion or the other, worked with your esteemed organization. You are heading the office here in Kolkata.
Yes.
So can you please tell us what is your main thrust? Are you promoting Indian culture to Indians, or are you serving as a bridge between foreign cultural troops and the Indian artists as well?
Namaskar, good morning everybody. Well, I have just joined here just 3-4 months back as the zonal head. And whatever I'll say, this is from my experience. We have been, ICCR is involved in promoting culture. It is not only India's culture abroad, as this is a soft power diplomacy. And also we are encouraging the cultural troops from other countries to come to India and give their performances. In fact, from 23rd of this month, just day after, we are having 3 days Russian festival in India, which has already started in Delhi. And Kolkata is hosting the program from 23rd to 25th. So 91 member delegations from Russia is visiting India. So likewise, we have been involved in Pacific countries, as the main theme, like the Indo-Pacific, as it suggested, the fluidities would be there. So it is not the land which has borders, but it's the oceans which is fluid. So through these exchanges, by sharing our culture, our values, we can really have the cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very clear. We'll make one more round with the panel and then we are coming to you. I hope we are able to hold your attention, because we have people who have devoted their lives to this mandate. Melinda, let me come to you. I really want to ask 2 questions so that one is, in your view, what is the importance of culture in diplomacy? Or what is the importance of cultural diplomacy? Because I think that is very central to what perhaps America does in India and in other countries as well. And the second related question really is, you are representing the US to a large part of India. You spoke earlier about your work and collaboration with the northeastern states. You are obviously looking at the eastern region of India as well. So this particular geographical region of India, how important it is in the overall concept of Indo-Pacific?
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think your first question about the importance of cultural diplomacy is a very, is critical to the discussions that we're going to have today. And it's also been touched on by my fellow colleagues on the panel, in that diplomacy is all about connections between governments, but it's also about connections between peoples. And we make connections between peoples first as diplomats, and then we're able to advance the interests of our nations. And so I think one of the ways that we emphasize, the United States emphasizes cultural diplomacy, is by making sure that the 4 million strong Indian diaspora in the United States are, the activities that they're doing to contribute to the diversity of the United States is amplified and also encouraged. We do things that we might call culture, but they also fit very much into business and education and all other realms, which is really just the act of people moving back and forth across borders so that they can develop relationships, so that they can fuse their ideas with the ideas of other people and therefore create innovations. And so I think that's a fundamental component of what diplomacy is all about, so that we can then advance our interests together. Your second question was specifically, oh goodness, I've forgotten.
Essentially what I'm trying to ask is how the US is looking at the eastern part of India and the northeast where you are taking so much interest in the overall Indo-Pacific context.
Thank you very much. And of course, geographically, when you look at the northeastern region, it's a very important connection point historically. And I think part of what we've been looking at doing is making sure that those historical connections are rebuilt, whether it's through inland waterways infrastructure development, whether it is through supply chains that used to exist and now can be rekindled in order to make our global supply chains more resilient again. We also recognize that economic vulnerability leads to other vulnerability. And so we work to raise awareness of trafficking in persons and trafficking of other things illegally across borders, and how that can undermine a society, especially one that's reliant on positive governance and rule of law. And so anywhere that there are illegal activities occurring, rule of law needs to be strengthened in order to support safety and security and therefore reduce economic vulnerability. And I think another component is just simply that many people in the United States do not know very much about the northeastern part of India. In fact, I have to say that I think there are a lot of Indians that may not know very much about the northeast part of India and the cultural diversity that exists there. And so one of the things that I see as my important role is to make people aware of the incredible diversity and the connections to cultural similarities that can help us. For example, as Daniel talked about the Indigenous First Nation peoples of Australia, of course the United States is also a location of Native Americans, and it's a very important part of our culture. And so one of the things that I've enjoyed seeing is the similarities between the textiles and the weaving and the other arts and crafts and sports between the cultures of the Northeast and the United States. And so I think it's very interesting to understand whether those cultural activities evolved similarly because we are all human beings, and therefore human beings create similar stories when we create societies, or if there are fundamental historical connections where the fusions therefore naturally spread. And I think that's something that as we know each other better, we can explore those questions.
Well, thank you very much. When you said perhaps not enough Indians may even know adequately about the Northeast, that rang a bell. And I wanted to stress that your host institution, Asian Confluence, has now emerged as a foremost think tank of the Northeast. It is based in Shillong, and it is taking the message of Northeastern identity and common interest from one state to the other. And this is a wonderful attempt here to bring it to Eastern India, to the heart of the old intellectual and cultural heart of India, to Kolkata. And it makes, it's fitting in very well. Very quickly, once again to you, Japan is one of the few countries which is very active in this region of India, Northeast and Eastern India. And if I understand correctly, you are helping in the economic development and also at the people-to-people connectivity. Would you like to share a bit all this briefly with our audience?
Thank you, Ambassador. I think one of the key important elements, people-to-people exchange and the deep more, connectivity is the language. I think language plays a very important role in people-to-people connection. The people of India have a high linguistic ability, which is really an advantage for them. I have seen that the billboard and advertisement here written in many languages. Also, people here use many languages in their everyday life. So nowadays, many Indian people are learning Japanese language, and more people are taking the Japanese language ability test every year. But the people in Japan, Ambassador, use only the native language, only Japanese. So we are always struggle towards the foreign language, including me. And we don't have some multi-ethnic culture. So the young generation have a domestic trend and a lesser exposure to other language, which is referred to as the Galapagos syndrome, which is the isolated island in the sea and cut off from the outside world. So that situation. So our younger generation, should be not only doing the culture play, but also expose the diversity. So that is our, real, challenge.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Quick question to you, because you spoke so well earlier about various things. In terms of Australia situated at one end of the Indo-Pacific, and clearly, like any other country, your immediate interest probably has to be South Pacific, around Australia, New Zealand, South Pacific. And yet, you are a big continental country, though with a smaller population. You are also able to take a lot of interest in the Indian part of the Indo-Pacific. How do you balance the two?
I don't think there's a question of balancing the two. As you say, I wouldn't say Australia is at the edge of the Indo-Pacific anymore. I think we're right in the centre of it. And so that's why that conception of Indo-Pacific marries very well with the Australian view of the world. In terms of, yes, I think there's a strong focus amongst our government officials, but also our community about engagement with our Pacific neighbours, but also at the ASEAN meetings with our ASEAN neighbours, and at the ASEAN set of meetings that just happened. I mean, it was ASEAN, APEC and G20. It was all in this part of the world, and our Prime Minister was, our lead representative there. So we've got a strong focus on our engagement with Southeast Asia. And as you say, with the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership that Australia and India signed last year, India has over the past few years become a more important partner for Australia. And part of that engagement in eastern India involves the Bay of Bengal, but also the eastern, the northeastern states. And then more generally, we've got now very strong defence engagement in the Bay of Bengal, as well as with Western Naval Command, so on both wings, as well as our leaders and strategic level engagement, and then the Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, which was signed earlier this year and will soon enter into force. And so that'll be one of the most ambitious free trade agreements that India has with any country in the world. And the fact that they chose Australia, I think, shows that increasing trust between our two countries and our two economies, and that India sees Australia as a very valuable partner in the Indo-Pacific, and certainly we do it's vice versa as well. So I think it's not a matter of balancing, because India, our Southeast Asian neighbours, our Pacific neighbours are all extremely important to our Indo-Pacific engagement. And there's a lot of interchange and interconnection between all those countries, because as you've heard at the COP in Egypt, at all these conferences of the G20, the EAS, ASEAN, we're sort of all working, hopefully, towards a more peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific. So we've all got a lot of our countries, and definitely the countries here on stage, have those similar interests at heart.
Thank you very much. that question was partially designed to provoke you so that the audience remains awake. I would like to take this opportunity to pay a deep tribute to the Australian think tanks and scholars who have been in the forefront to decipher and promote the concept of Indo-Pacific. And again, young scholars sitting at the back, those who may be future PhDs on Indo-Pacific, you simply cannot proceed this work without reading some of the finest scholars from Australia on this subject. Mr. Mishra, very quickly and very briefly, you referred to a Russian delegation. Some of us think that Russia also in a way is an Indo-Pacific country, but others don't think so. But my question is, do you have plans, as you have now taken over recently here, to invite dance troupes and artists from the neighboring countries, South Asia or Southeast Asia, in your future program?
Yes, sir. That is being all organized. Inviting the cultural troops from other countries is it's primarily done by the headquarter. So then it is decided by ICCR headquarter in Delhi. Then the plans, then it is divided whether it is going to Mumbai, Kolkata, to different zones. So accordingly we organize the show.
I must take this opportunity to give a plug to the ICCR. I think in this cultural city, all of you know this organization, but we know very well in India, in all of India, and in all the other foreign capitals where Indian ICCR centers are present. I think they are doing a wonderful job in terms of promoting often foreign cultural troops in India and of course Indian arts and culture abroad all across the world. So that is wonderful. At this stage, may I now invite brief questions or even observations, because I'm not here as a headmaster, I'm here only as a chair or moderator. So questions or observations are welcome from the floor. We can take maybe 3 in the first round. And the only ground rule is please identify yourself and speak a bit loudly so that your voice reaches us. Thank you.
Shall I make it first or I do not know? Hello, gentlemen. Hello. He stood first question.
Okay.
So I am Dr. S.B. Chakraborty, the General Secretary of the Asiatic Society, Kolkata, which is the oldest institution, not only in this country, in the whole of the continent, which was founded in 1784 by Sir William Jones. But that is besides the story now. At the moment sitting through this session, an issue haunted me. I'm not sure whether I could follow it properly, but it seems the culture has taken a center stage, the focal point in this conversation. If that be the so, why then we call it soft diplomacy? This should be ideally the most powerful diplomacy in the sense of its pure term, and strategically some kind of involvement should be there across, and also plan very consciously of certain programs which can percolate down to all levels, because after all, it is culture that brings us together. For example, if one Tagore could hold the entire globe at one stage of this evolution, why can't others follow? Of course, there are not many examples, but I end with repeating that if this is the most powerful integrational factor, we should not call it soft diplomacy. It should be the most powerful diplomacy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think you certainly are helping diplomats to learn new vocabulary, because we have heard about soft power. and this is the first time, at least for me, I'm hearing soft diplomacy. But we'll talk about it, and I'm sure I'll request Melinda to come back and answer that. But second question?
Hello. Hi, I'm Joydeep Ghosh.
Okay.
I'm Joydeep Ghosh. One congratulations.
No, we are not able to hear. Can you give another microphone to our friend that works?
Thank you so much. I'm Joydeep Ghosh from Raajkutir. Warm congratulations to everyone on Indo-Pacific confluence, Asian confluence it is. And I think once President Barack Obama said in New Delhi, बड़े बड़े देशों में बुरे बुरे काम होता है, and then senorita, then President Donald Trump also came at Motera Stadium, Narendra Modi Stadium in Gujarat, and also I think President Joe Biden will come definitely in 2023. So my question is to Melinda Pavek, ma'am, is what are the diplomacy going on through ISRO and NASA in cyberspace security and cyberspace things?
You have really taken it well beyond the domain of culture, but we will respect your right and we'll see whether we can answer that. One more question from the audience, please. You can imagine I can't see from here, but I'm beginning to see somebody's got the microphone. Okay.
So, I don't know, it's not.
Is it working? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can hear. Yeah. So hello, I am Professor Shomojit Roy. I am from Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Kolkata. I have a general question because I understand this is a cultural platform. Basically, if one looks at how the perceptions of cultures are, they're based on philosophical ways how nations are built. Now, the Western civilization, for instance, is built, or in that sense, the Indian civilization as well, is built on a thought process which is essentially based on knowledge and which is kind of male-dominated in a way that is very different from the Far Eastern philosophy, where it is more the philosophy of water, the philosophy of females. Now, that perhaps leads to a breach of understanding, and how does culture and communication addresses or embraces these philosophical differences to initiate a dialogue? This would be my question to the honorable consulates who are present there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll change my mind. I will request you to take the first question on soft diplomacy. The professor says, when you're talking of culture, why not use soft diplomacy as a phrase? Can you please handle that?
I don't think that's well, I think I agree with your point that cultural diplomacy and people-to-people diplomacy is a huge part of what we do, and it's one of the essential levers that we use to influence, advocate, and persuade. So I agree with your premise that that what is termed soft power is much more than that. So I don't want to sort of perpetuate the misnomer, which I think I agree with you on your point.
Good. In that case, he would not ask another question. That is wonderful because we are running out of time. Melinda, will you please take this question about space and security and the rest of it?
Well, I will say that since ISRO is predominantly located in a different consular district, my team doesn't have as much engagement in the work that's happening between NASA and ISRO. But I do know that in all of the nations of the Quad and all of the nations of the world, we are very clearly exploring what is happening in space and how space is both a peaceful location, as we've all agreed it needs to be, and as well as an opportunity to better explore and understand how we can clean up the mess we've made in space because of all of the satellites and other garbage that exists there. As we become more and more reliant on communications that are supported through satellites in space, and we also look at our opportunities to explore and set foot on the moon again on our way to Mars. So I think there are many opportunities that that NASA and ISRO are exploring, as well as with other countries of the world, because of course space exploration is not something that just one country does. It's something we all do together, and again, we also must have shared norms and values about how we use space and how we ensure that it remains a common safe good for all.
Thank you, Melinda. Third question, in all fairness, should go to Japan.
Yes. I think that's the question is some of the aspect of the culture among our four countries. It's very key on our diplomacy. So I can say that the respect for the diversity of the customs, traditions, religions, culture, that kind of cultural aspect, and an understanding of the people of each country emerges from diversity. So diversity is one of the key. And I would also like to say that the key diplomacy lies in the people-to-people relationship, because deep understanding between people is indispensable, which helps for the success in the business, leading to the economic development in each country in the long run. Further development of relationship with each country, nothing can begin without deepening our understanding of each other's people through people-to-people exchanges. So I think one big example is Kolkata. As I mentioned in this, beginning of this session, the city of joy, and it is a melting pot of the history of the culture and the people exchanges between different countries and India. So city of Kolkata has always accepted, tolerated all cultures and religions. So, for example, about Durga Puja, which is actually a Hindi festival, but also, appreciated and participated by people of other religions. So, tolerance, diversity, people-to-people exchanges, and people-to-people's understanding contribute to regional stability and prosperity. I think that peace and prosperity prevails not only from the sharing existing ideologies and values, but also from the grassroots level of exchanges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we have just run out of time, but I have an offer to make. Those who still have questions can ask our colleagues as we proceed perhaps for a cup of tea. Let me very quickly, in one flat minute, present a very brief summation for the benefit of the rapporteur. What came out very clearly is that the concept of Indo-Pacific is here to stay. It is a concept on which there is every day greater clarity, even while debate among diplomats, scholars and others continues. It is a realm in which democratic countries have been working very closely to develop cooperation that covers not merely the diplomacy, politics, economy, but also other spheres such as technology, culture, and the rest of it. This is a very positive sign. Further, I think what came out very clearly from our dialogue is that as compared to the political and economic dimensions, the cultural dimensions need further exploration, and bigger limelight needs to be placed on that. This particular event and this particular session were designed to be steps in that direction. We are not talking of uniformity in the Indo-Pacific. We are talking of unity in diversity in all its manifestations, this region. And as my colleagues brought it out very clearly, there is importance of cultural diplomacy. There is great significance of the proper use of soft power. And above all, there is a tremendous need to develop people-to-people relationships and thereby build and strengthen what we at Asian Confluence call the third space. Dear friends, thank you very much for your attention and presence, and please give an applause to our panel. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
I'd like to thank Ambassador Bhatia and our panelists for this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we will take a very, very short break and meet for the next session, which will begin at 12:15. Kindly join us for tea outside and be back a couple of minutes before that, before 12:15. Thank you. You can take your cup of tea and bring it back inside and have it at leisure. Thank you.
আলাদা লেভেল কম আছে বাস লেভেল আর বাস বাড়া ঠিক আছে বাড়িয়ে দিচ্ছি এক সেকেন্ড দাদা এটা ওয়েটারটা বন্ধ করে দাও পুরো সাইড ফিট লাগিয়ে দাও বাজাই বাজাই ये आपके आउट बज रहा है ये वाला देखो बजाइए बजाइए রাইট হ্যান্ড লেভেল কম করো রাইট হ্যান্ডের লেভেলটা একটু কম করে দাও ডানাটা কম করে দাও
Check. Hey, it is. Hello. Hello, check. Hello. আর বাড়বে বেশ কম করে একটা এইচএফ হ্যালো হ্যালো চেক আর একটা এইচএফ হ্যালো হ্যালো চেক হ্যালো হ্যালো চেক আর একটা এইচএফ মিড একটু কম করে দাও আর এইচএফটা একটু বাড়িয়ে দাও হ্যালো হ্যালো চেক না বেশ হয়ে গেছে সার্ভ করো আরো হ্যালো হ্যালো চেক হ্যালো আকা মা বই পানকুয়া থই পানকুয়া তোর মাসাক ধর্ম মর হ্যালো হ্যালো চেক এটা হল সাউন্ডতে আছে কি ইফেক্টটা পুরো কেটে দাও ফ্ল্যাট করে দাও হ্যালো হ্যালো চেক হ্যালো এই একটা হমিং আছে হ্যালো হ্যালো চেক হ্যাঁ লেভেল ঠিক শুধু গেইন একটু বাড়িয়ে দাও বাকি ব্যালেন্স একদম ঠিক আছে না না বিলকুল নয় অটো রিভার্ব আছে অলতে হ্যালো 1 ঠিক আছে ফাইনাল
You play. রুটটা বাড়তে চায় stay here? Yes. Okay. Just a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session, which is on trade and connectivity. This session aims to explore ways to reinvigorate and strengthen the maritime connect among the Indo-Pacific countries in the context of current geopolitics and historical connects. This will engage and touch upon issues of infrastructure, regional initiatives, and strategic interest in the Indo-Pacific. As cultural introduction to the theme, we present Yatra, the flowing narrative. This is being presented by India and Indonesia. The vibrant weaves and patterns of handloom industries, local narratives and rituals of India and Indonesia are woven together in this artistic presentation. Yatra literally means journey in Sanskrit and money in Javanese. Yatra is synonymous with movements, sounds, stories, and growth. This performance will trace the once existing rich maritime trade links and the possibilities of exploring this in the present context. The performance is an outcome of research on the sense of belonging, shared culture and heritage, interculturalism, sustainability, and development. As we said, the performers are from Indonesia and India. Please enjoy the presentation.
Reimagine Reconnection Indo-Pacific synergy.
Karasaning sa Soryo Kung manungso Sahasra Kiranaya Dhimahi Tanno Surya Prachodaya Sirnaneng sang Kung
I am deep, I am quiet, and alone, yet roaring always. Within my core I preserve a treasure pot full of tales, stories and sagas. Can you guess who am I? Some call me Mahadaudhi and some Samudra. I bring to you all a story from my treasure pot as I have witnessed the making of history. I have witnessed evolution of civilization, trade and commerce, people and society, narratives taking turns into different directions exploring life. Let us all voyage to a tale of two nations standing tall with beauty, power and grace, and the maritime relationship that they had shared once upon a time through me.
Sopno Sindhuko Saiti Anichi Kolingo Boito Saji Kete Nua Chijo Thibolo Sanghato Monoku Mohibo Aji Shoshanti Mongore Mangala Puji Mododi Jale Jatraro Bili Boito Bandeyaji Heya 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 Ho Heya 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 Ho.
Hey, look at the splashes of colors. Look at the people. Look at the crowd. Do you see? Do you see the exchange? The beetle leaves, the shining gold, the different colored traditional fabrics such as Sambalpuri fabrics, tie and dye, rich patola, ikat, batik, oh, so much more.
Tak kita tak dah. Tak tulu tak tulu tak. Tak kita tak dah. Tatin nak tin kita dah. Tak tulu tak tulung tak. Tatin nak tin kita dah. Tung tak. ding tulung tang ding ta tulung tang da tin tina ke tin da tin tina tang to ta tang ta tang to tang ding ta tulung tang ta tin tina ke tin kirta ke tere kirta tang ding ta tulung tang ding tang de ta tin tina tang de ta tin tina tang de ta tin tina ta ke ta tin tina de ta tin tina ta ke ta tin tina de ta tin tina ta ke ta tin tina da tre ki ta tre ki ta tre ki ta tre ki ta da tre ki ta tre ki ta tre ki ta da
Do you recognize these feathers? The image is still woven with threads of melancholy. His painful voice still echoes in my ears. Oof. Jatayu, one of the epitome of bravery, one of the most distinct character of the great epic, the Ramayana. that was composed in the 5th century BCE by Valmiki. Wayang Orang Ramayana is a visual treat and a representation of the epic Ramayana saga, performed in Indonesia, the land of Thousand Island. Not only epics, but festivals like Bali Jatra is still celebrated in Odisha, which suggests strong historical ties between Odisha and Bali. Festival of Masakapam Kape also deserves a special mention, which is celebrated in Bali with the belief that a person is going to his original homeland of Kalinga. Is it just a mere coincidence? Or is it saying something to you, to us? Well, I leave it to you to decide.
Agama boy panoku athoi panoku atoro masaka dharma mora.
There are currents too strong to dam. There are bonds too deep to break. There are words too true to say. There are rhymes too beautiful to write. Do you fail to say what you really mean? Is the truth far from your lips? Can we fix the broken bonds? Or do we choose to stay victims to the hands of destiny? Do you hear the blowing winds of trade echo in your memory lane? Can we explore the buzzing ecosystem and flow through the waters of mystery once again? Can the ties that bind be repaired once again if we revive our history?
হ্যাঁ
I don't know. It's too close here. If you take a step back, it falls. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to now come to the conversation on reimagining the Indo-Pacific maritime routes. Moderating this session is Makaran Shuklaji, former director, Jawaharlal Nehru Indian Cultural Center, Jakarta, Indonesia. And our speakers are Sumit Nakandala, Director, Center for Indo-Lanka Initiative, Pathfinder Foundation, Sri Lanka. Nilanthi Samaran Naike, Director, Strategy and Policy Analysis Program, CNA, Arlington, Virginia, USA. Sifra Lenton, Fellow, Bombay History Study, Gateway House, Mumbai, India. Lalatendu Das Mohapatra, Director, Center for Judicial Archives, Odisha, India. I request the chair and the speakers to kindly take their places on the dais. I request the chair, Makaran Shuklaji, to kindly take over the proceedings of this session.
Saraswati Nrutyatu Vachi Me Sada. Very good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, friends at this session. I'm privileged to have four eminent panelists, scholars of their and champions of their various specific subjects. With three references, I'll try to set the narrative, and then we'll, in a very conversational and a very informal way, tend to bring out some suggestions, solutions out of their scholarly experience of decades. Every Indian, every average Indian, every morning, once he or she gets up, wakes up, and puts his or her foot on the earth, there is a shloka that our Vedas, our scriptures have trained us to chant every morning, and we do so. And here it goes. Samudra Vasane Devi, Parvatastana Mandale, Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam, Pada Sparsham Kshamaswame. I want you to reimagine the humility of the people of this region. Ladies and gentlemen, it says, it apologizes to Mother Earth, considering her as the wife of Lord Vishnu. The Indian would say that Samudra, the ocean, are your ornaments, and mountains your body. O goddess earth, please forgive me. I apologize to thee as I set my foot upon you, and I'll walk upon you during the day. So that is what this region, this Pacific region, stands for. And this is what the importance of Samudra is for us, the maritime, what we are all here to reimagine and reconnect. At the same time, I would like your attention on the attitude of the same Indian on what we feel about waters. While having bath, he or she would take some water in the palm and would chant another shloka. Gange cha Yamune chaiva Godavari Saraswati Narmade Sindhu Kaveri Jalesmin Sannidhem Kuru. Meaning all the above mentioned 7 most pious rivers of India, the waters may accumulate and combined come into the water that I am holding in my palm. And as I throw upon my body, it will purify me. So with this humility, this beautiful combination of humility and attitude and approach, India, this region, the Indian subcontinent, has been designed by nature, by our geographical, historical, and cultural forces over centuries. So once again, we will try in the next 1 hour to reimagine the maritime roots of the Indo-Pacific. As Ambassador Bhatia very nicely put it, the 9 states, and if we reimagine, we are all about doing reimagining here. So please reimagine along with me. I did so while I was doing my preparation. Reimagine the map of India like a human face. So from year to year, from Bengal to Gujarat, the 9 states that enjoy the maritime beauty create a beautiful smile, and which comprises of more than 60% of the GDP. So the commerce of culture and the culture of commerce, both are and have been very vibrant since centuries, since the Vedic times. And the most popular culture, the mainstream cinema, Indian cinema, has also now acknowledged how it's being reimagined. Superstar Akshay Kumar of Indian cinema has come up with a movie called Ram Setu. In the movie, he tries to establish and prove that the Ram Setu between India and Sri Lanka, more than 7,000 years back in the era of Rama, was a man-made structure. So with that narrative, I would throw the first question to Dr. Lalitendu Mahapatra. Sir, please throw some light on the archives, the historical, and eventually the cultural connects that have been prevalent with India and the rest of the Southeast Asian countries since ages, in particular with reference to Odisha, which is your core subject.
So far the archival materials are concerned, most of these materials are in European archives, especially in the archives of Netherlands and England, and also in French archives, because they are all the traders, the companies who traded with India. And they have left us a huge resources of materials for the historians. But still, one thing I would like to say that those do not set complete pictures of Indian maritime activities, because they are all official records. So they speak only about the company's activities. So they do not speak about the totality of the maritime pictures in India. So very often their records are also little bit biased. They themselves are biased. So that is the archival resources we have. But apart from that, so far I'm talking about my own state. We have a rich cultural heritage. So far these maritime activities are concerned. We have so many folk tales, so many songs, so many proverbs, which establishes our connection with countries like Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and also Burma. For example, one particular fruit, that is cashew fruit. Cashew fruit, it is called differently in India. It is called kaju in northern India. In Bengal, it is called hijli badam, this kaju nuts. But in Odisha, it is said lonka ambo. Because ambo means, you know, the mango. Because they believe that this particular fruit or vegetable has been brought by the Portuguese from Sri Lanka. So that's why it is known as Lanka Ambo. And so also, even chili. Chili is in Odisha and Bengal, it is called Lanka. But in northern India, it is called mircha. So, because it is also believed that they have been brought from Lanka also. And there are also many literatures and many also oral traditions in Odisha, which speaks of Odisha's maritime contact with Sri Lanka. And apart from that, every year in the month of Kartik Purnami, almost all the Odia's people, they float a miniature boat in the nearby rivers or ponds. After bathing themselves, they float their boat by chanting a song, Akama boy, Panogua khai, Panogua toro, Masiko dharma moro. As it was just shown in the dance performance, the Akama boys. So in this way, many such memories, and the clearest example is the Bali Jatra, because this Bali Jatra is celebrated on the full moon day of Kartik, the day when this boat floating is celebrated, and this is also known as Boita Bandhana in Odia. So these types of memories are still preserved in Odisha.
Thank you so much, Professor. So one reimagining that comes out of Professor's responses. So far we all know about the Bali Jatra, which is one of the largest public festivals of Odisha. But physically, practically, there could be a possibility. There is a possibility actually, wherein the Indian Navy and along with the Indonesian Navy and help of the rest of the ASEAN and BIMSTEC countries, navies, could do a joint cultural exercise. They do a lot of military exercises together, but a cultural exercise wherein genuinely a boat could start on this Purnima and could reach Bali, and there would be a reciprocal performance happening in Indonesia to celebrate maybe Katak Jatra. So, see, we've already started, the pitch is set. I would move to, I would come to Sifra. You are representative, a scholar of one of the most widespread communities across the world, and also a scholar on diaspora. Indian diaspora has been very vibrant over centuries now, both in cultural and commercial aspects. How do you would like to evaluate and suggest on the diaspora's role to help reconnect and reimagine the Indo-Pacific maritime routes?
See, I mean, first of all, I'd like to thank Asian Conference for inviting me for today's program. I've been doing a lot of diaspora work writing, and when Gateway House did its Indo-Pacific paper, I did the paper on diaspora in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, I found that there are actually 3 waves of migration. I mean, everyone talks about, Professor has talked about the very ancient ties between the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, Ceylon, Myanmar. And that kind of cultural influence, of course, is what we witness right now with the dance. It comes through dance, it comes through language, it comes through ritual. Even a country like Indonesia, which is predominantly Islamic, they do follow, one of their currency notes had an impression or an image of Ganesha, along with the education minister of that country, basically because Ganesha is viewed as the god of knowledge. So we have these sort of threads which we need to draw out, but this is a very early influence. Then we have the medieval migration, but what we know as people of Indian or ethnic origin today are essentially those who went to these regions during the colonial period, who are have got connections or family connections with the subcontinent. So in this conference today, we are talking about all the soft fluencies and that we have between India and the Indo-Pacific. But I think where diaspora is concerned, Indian diaspora has to be viewed from two parts. One is the old diaspora, which is, I would refer to, are recognizable as Indians because they've gone during a later period or the colonial period. And one is the NRI Indians who are going there to this region, like Singapore, Indonesia, and Ceylon, and basically for IT people who are going there, IT, commerce, lawyers. So India has got a soft bedrock of power because of the similarities in culture, the old diaspora community, and the new NRIs who are reviving Indian culture there. So I think we have a great opportunity, and would you like me to talk about what we can do to leverage, or maybe at a later point? So very briefly, I think what we can do to really engage, and I think the Ministry of External Affairs and the Indian government is already doing that because they realize that we've got this really strong soft power. Sorry to use the word soft power, but there it is. But we've got this really strong diaspora with connections to India. Of course, they are foreign citizens, but we try to engage with them. Yes, we are trying to engage with them through culture, religious pilgrimages. But I would say more effort needs to be made in terms of education, where those students come and study in Indian universities, and our students go there to study. And especially with the new private universities that we have coming up. And I feel that this diaspora or these communities are an important cultural bridge, understanding business ethos. Because after all, why did India go there, and why did the Southeast Asians or East Asians come to India? They came for trade. So I think a cultural ethos and understanding is important for any kind of trade really to happen. And I think Indian communities play an important role in that.
Thank you so much. As you very touched upon very correctly, Indian community which ventures out of the country to the other countries are basically, and eventually they turn out to become employment generators, majority of us. So that is one thing that is a great catalyst for a great medium of spreading the Indian culture, and why Indian culture, the Indian textile, Indian cuisine, the languages. The best example would be the number of words added to the Oxford Dictionary in the English language in the last 300 years, which are from Indian origin, would say a lot to that. So yes, we are a very open-minded diaspora. We go to some other country and we try to be as beneficial to that country without compromising our own core culture. And that makes a great combination wherein we can reimagine and it will eventually help us reconnect. Coming to Ambassador Sumit, you had an elaborate experience on the BIMSTEC group of nations and especially India-Sri Lanka relations. How would you like to comment upon, and how do you see as the vision for the next 10, 15 years, a decade or 2 decades, how we could all together reimagine the maritime routes? What are the initiatives we could, innovative initiatives, creative initiatives we could touch upon?
Yeah, thank you. I am very much fascinated by the Sri Lanka, then Indian Ocean, especially Bay of Bengal, historical connectivities. I think ample literature is available. Most of these literature are sometimes historical narrative, like Mahavamsa, the great chronicle we have, then Dhatu Vamsa about the Orissa Sri Lanka connections. Then we have Chula Vamsa, and then we have a great chronicle called Pujavali and Rajavali. Now these things are there, but I normally look at the historical perspective on a scientific basis, backed up by the archaeological and anthropological evidences. I think one distinguished archaeologist, Indian archaeologist, is K. Rajan, has done a wonderful study on India's maritime relations and Sri Lanka. For me, I don't have any problem, because I always say that the regional integration and cooperation in the Bay of Bengal, let us start with the Bay of Bengal, is a matter for rediscovering our common heritage. Now this is where we are at the moment. Since morning, I think we are trying to rediscover our common cultural heritage. Now while you are doing that, I think we also need to learn how do you read the past. That's important. That is where I little bit differ from the written historical narrative. Because in written historical narrative, there are problems, because the author's view is the predominant view. This is where we have a serious problem with sometimes interpretation of bilateral relations between India and Sri Lanka. If you look through Mahavamsa, there are problems. Now, Sri Lanka, I'll come to Bay of Bengal, but since the audience is not aware, Sri Lanka as an island nation, of course, centrally located in the Indian Ocean, so centrally located in the Indo-Pacific, had very vibrant cultural relations between with Southeast Asia. Especially, I think the best time of these relations were between 11th to 12th centuries. And Parakrama Bahu the first and Vijay Bahu the first, these were the basically kings at that time. And similarly, at the same time, I think the Coromandel Coast and Sri Lanka had lots of interactions, trade, migration, and the well-known Sri Lankan archaeologist Shiran Dharanigal commented that 7,000 years before present, there was the visible landmass between Sri Lanka and India, South India. And Mante was a very important trading post. Then Godavaya, which is the Hambantota, the current, the largest port, was a very important interport. So Sri Lanka had a lot of trading activities. Between 1,300 to 1,500, there were 5 trading networks in the Indo-Pacific area. One was the Bay of Bengal, then Java network, Zulu Sea network. The 5 were there. So it was integrated. In a way, the Bay of Bengal and Southeast Asia all these things were integrated before the post-Westphalian system came. For me, the integration in cultural integration and trade integration, whatever integration that you see, I think I'm very hopeful. I'm very, very optimistic because I look at the whole question in rediscovering the common cultural heritage. There are, I mean, we can talk hours on that because the experiences that we have between, I mean, the language you said, language, you also said language. I think the entire entirety in South Asia and Southeast Asia, including India, the Prakrit was the oldest form of the language, and then Sanskrit, the purified form. So there had been a common substratum in Prakrit. That's how the languages develop over the years. Right, we can come back always.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and I really thank you actually, very diplomatically. You, along with optimism, have put light on a challenge which also Professor touched upon, and that is because of the advancement in science and technology, we have eventually come to know that there are some discrepancies in the archaeological and the cultural history that has been taught to the Indian generations so far, and there are some corrections need to be made. And we are all optimistic about it that eventually we will make sure that the truth comes out, the truth prevails. At the end of everything, it all narrows down to vitamin M, money, commerce. So, Nilanthi, you are from Indian origin, based in USA. So you have this eagle's eye view on this entire Indo-Pacific activity. How would you like to, and I would like you to put some light on, through the lens of trade, and how could we analyze and strategize eventually so that we can make, the governments could make some concrete policies, because borders and boundaries are a political, my nation, your nation is a political term, but when it comes to culture, it's more like air and water. How will you divide a language? So it's a very tricky area. How would you like to help out, and what do you think could be done?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I'll share some personal views on the topic. Yes, I very much am an outsider looking at the region, and it's a fascinating region, and I think it's just become more dynamic.
You are an insider who's outside right now.
It's a really excellent question you asked, because I think we can think about it on a few levels. In terms of politics and connectivity, we've seen politics hurt connectivity, essentially with the 1965 war, where experts will talk about the Bay of Bengal and the waterways, how trade used to flow really since ancient times. And so we saw politics and war really halt that immediately. But now, though, in recent years, we're reimagining what essentially was the past, what has been since ancient times. This period of this lack of connectivity is really the aberration. This is the exception to history. So, so in this sense, politics can also help connectivity, innate connectivity. And we've seen in the last decade of India's relationship with Bangladesh, essentially, as that relationship has gotten closer, we've seen policy progress in terms of connectivity, signing the coastal shipping agreement, exploring opportunities for the use of Chattogram and Mongla ports, actually conducting, just over the summer, some recent trial runs to actually see what some of the connectivity would look like, and really start to practice that. So as a result of some of these developments, such as the land boundary agreement being signed, also in the international arbitration in resolving the maritime dispute between India and Bangladesh, and also international arbitration resolving Bangladesh's maritime dispute with Myanmar. Essentially, that has helped free up the possibilities for connectivity and more trade. And to mention a point I want to build on, we're talking about the Bay of Bengal. I think it's important, when I look at the Bay of Bengal from the outside, I think it's an important source of strength as we're thinking about the Indo-Pacific and looking at the Indian Ocean side of things. Really, the engagement of international legal mechanisms that's the foundation that upholds trade and connectivity to take place. So the fact that you have India and Bangladesh peacefully resolve their maritime disputes in international legal mechanisms and accept the decision and move on to pursue actual progress in terms of advancements of connectivity. I think that is a strength that maybe doesn't get a lot of attention, but looking at the Bay of Bengal and especially contrasting it with some of the more contested waters in the Pacific, like the South China Sea, where there was a maritime dispute, but China did not engage with the Permanent Court of Arbitration on the Philippines dispute. So I think you can really look to the Bay of Bengal as a highlight and an aspect of this region as we're talking about culture and we're talking today about culture and trade and connectivity. That is an aspect that really speaks highly of the region and it's really a model to the rest of the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you so much for your views. Very important, something that comes out of this is that the 9 basic states of India, which have maritime relations with the rest of the world, it's not just the sole responsibility of the central government. The state governments also could do a lot by themselves in terms of engaging universities with the centuries-old Southeast Asian countries that they have had cultural links with. Of course, a lot of it has been done already in terms of Nalanda and other universities that are doing wonderful work. But at state level as well, for example, say Gujarat, because all 9 states have different languages, different histories, different cultures. They have had their different, varied, vibrant empires, and they all had one-on-one relations with either the Middle East or the Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, the southern states. So, yes, this is one thing that comes out of this Samudra Manthan, this 2-day Samudra Manthan. This is the first Ratna that's coming out, that there is a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of optimism and hope from the state governments to take the initiative further and revitalize their historical, cultural ties with the other countries that they have always had. Thank you so much. One question I would like to ask with your permission to myself, and will like to answer that, because as a part of my cultural journey, I got the opportunity to spend a decade as an integral part of Indian Council for Cultural Relations, ICCR, both half the tenure, half the decade inside as a regional head here and a cultural representative abroad. A very important initiative of ICCR, if most genuinely and correctly pitched, has immense and miraculous potentials, and that is the Indian government or ICCR offering the scholarships, fully funded scholarship to the foreign nationals. Almost all the Southeast Asian countries, BIMSTEC countries, enjoy the wonderful, fully funded scholarship provided by Government of India and conducted by MEA, eventually coordinated by ICCR as the nodal agency. And the scholars, the students who come to Indian universities to do their UG, PG, PhD and postdoctoral research studies are actually our cultural and academic ambassadors. So when they go back, and I'm pretty sure we have ambassadors, Ambassador Bhatia, Ambassador Das, who would vouch how beneficial these alumni of ICCR become to the embassies and the consulates of India in accredited countries. because we've seen ex-ICCR alumni students becoming prime ministers of some countries, or business tycoons, or renowned academicians. So this is a wonderful potential, great opportunity, and again the state along with central government in communion with ICCR could create a wonderful synergy. Now that we have the MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, has also been able to compile a list of all the alumni of entire ICCR period since last decades. And we were amazed to know that some of the students who came and studied in Indian universities are at the top of their professions in their countries and are always friends forever of India. So yes, we complete the first round and we still have some time. Thank you so much for being so brief, and we have 10 more minutes before we make the forum open for the audience to one very quick response. Again, I'll stick to the words because we don't have much time. One thing that you would reimagine, and we'll stick to the word for all four of you, about reimagining. How would you reimagine the archival or the historical corrections being made about the history or the maritime history of India, which will eventually help and create a new reimagining?
Yes, I think there is a strong prospect of revival of this both trade and cultural relationships between India and all the Southeast Asian countries and Sri Lanka is there. Because you see, one of these a very pertinent thing about the Indian trade was, it was always meant for the common people. Common people of both these regions, they are benefited by this trade. Indians were exporting very coarse textiles and also the food grains, which were consumed by the people there. So this perspective, because now also with the growth of the IT sector, now every common man is using this IT services. So there are also countries like South Korea and also in South Asian regions also. They can make investment in India to grow it in all the IT hub cities. That is just one of these examples. But there are also prospects in other areas like food processing and also in the steel sector and also the minerals also. It can be revived. And also in tourism sector also, because you see in Eastern India, it is a Buddhist heritage hub. So according to an estimate, every year 3 million Buddhist pilgrims comes from Sri Lanka to Eastern India, especially to Bodh Gaya and Bihar. So this can be also channelized for the further improvement of tourism in this area.
Thank you so much, Professor. Very rightly said, two most important, especially for BIMSTEC and the Southeast Asian countries, the Buddhist trail, tourism trail, and the Ramayana tourism trail. If these two are initiated with full vibrancy, it can create wonders. A lot of positive steps have already started. The annual Ramayana festival that happens, which invites and compiles all the, because if I'm not wrong, please correct me, there are more than 730 officially acknowledged and documented Ramayanas across. And it's not just India, but it's the entire ASEAN stretch, which have their own distinct Ramayanas, the versions of Ramayana. So with such connections, we could reconnect. And yes, very rightly said, Professor, when we reimagine, or try to set a policy or the new narrative, the top level should be people to people, common man to common man. It has to be CM to CM, eventually coming down to PM to PM. So, very rightly said, because it starts with person to person, and then it's eventually the empires that see their benefits in joining or creating strategies. Sifra, how do you reimagine, very briefly?
How do I reimagine the Indo-Pacific and the connections between all the countries of the Indo-Pacific? I think at least the Bay of Bengal region, as everyone has mentioned, is actually, as she mentioned, is actually an area of peace, and relative stability. So all the connections that did happen in the past, right from trade to people, to culture, to religious synthesization or syncretism, everything, language, art, literature, is happening now. But I would really reimagine actually moving away from colonial narratives, going back to, as someone suggested on this panel, that I think you suggested, having these voyages being reenacted. Because if you go to see, we are looking at everything really from the top, but if you go along the coast of India, you see the same shipbuilding techniques, okay? You could use parallel sailing like the Chola Navy did to go across to Southeast Asia, really as, as a demonstration, and then have a cultural fest on that side. So I think we need to go to our indigenous shipbuilding techniques, arts, look at our local or native archives. I don't like to use the word native, but our indigenous archives. And move away from the colonial narrative of global trade, because intercoastal trading or intracoastal trading in this region is still very active. We need to pull out those threads, and we need to really sort of amplify it. That's the way I would imagine it. Education, I would emphasize again, is a very, very important way of leveraging soft power. And a lot is happening on the education frontier. And I liked your suggestion about offering fully funded scholarships for international students, other than those from the BIMSTEC region. So I think that we have a really vibrant, but how do we sort of channelize it and put it out there? I think tourism is, we really need to up our tourism game, not just religious tourism, but even along the coastal region. We need to really get out there and sort of promote our even private and top universities and draw students even from the US and the developed nations. And I think that we need to go have a relook at the archive and really change our lens and see what our traditional artists and arts, they also have a living legacy and a written legacy which can be explored. And we have scholars who are doing that. But it just needs to be highlighted and amplified.
Thank you so much. Very well said and very well pronounced. One very important cultural ambassador of India has been since 2015, the IDY. And this is my personal remark. The International Day of Yoga has created wonders in taking the Indian ancient, it's like yoga for all, the slogan as it goes. And I'll also like to club the vision statement of ICCR, taking India to the world and bringing the world to India. In this case, while we talk about taking India to the world, the International Day of Yoga today has done marvelous job. It has created so much of employment in the ASEAN and BIMSTEC countries, wherein local. I know some of the sports teachers who came down to India, did yoga courses, and now are today so many celebrities in these countries, in our neighboring countries, our friendly countries, are taking up yoga as their regular exercise routine, because it is one that gives peace for body, mind, and soul, all three. So, please.
No, I forgot to add the most important soft power of India is the film industry. So we do know that, you know, even in the early days, even in when the Indian film industry actually began, that even films without any voice or whatever, Indian films would travel to Southeast Asia and this region, and they were appreciated. They were mostly mythological films, but they could appeal to this region because of the themes. So I just wanted to just put that out there. That's all.
Some small-time television channels who were on the verge of bankruptcy in Indonesia, somebody suggested them, because the entire film industry, the biggest production house of Indonesia, film production house, are Indian origin, our own Sindhis. So they said, why don't you go to India, acquire the rights of some popular daily TV soap, and today these TV stars are Indian TV stars, the Mahabharat, the new Mahabharat, or the Balika Vadhu, if I may name so, actually have become cult after being dubbed and retelecast in their own countries, be it Vietnam or... So this is, of course, yes, a popular culture, but so far so good. Popular culture, that is especially the entertainment media industry, has been independent and having standing alone, tried to create its significance and spread Indian culture in whatever, if we actually think that is the Indian culture. But yes, it is official that after the national anthem of Indonesia, the second most popular song in Indonesia is still today, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. So that says it all. Ambassador, very quickly before we move to the audience, how would you reimagine?
Yes. When I said earlier that we should engage in the process of rediscovering our common cultural and other heritage, I do not, I'm not saying that we need to go there. What we need to it is to first identify what were these common cultural heritage. And that common cultural heritage essentially will have to be brought forward according to the current socio-economic and political structure. Well, we are living in the world with the most advanced technologies, whether it is a warfare or airwaves or anything. I mean, we have the best technology. And so that's the reimagine. How do we do that? I mean, number of suggestions were there, basically the tourism, and then yoga, then these are part of, all these things didn't come from the sky. Those were products of intense human engagement between the people. For example, now the microlithic tools identified in Terai region in Tamil Nadu, and some of the microlithic tools found in Sri Lanka, entirely similar, typologically similar, technologically similar, but this goes back to 48,000 BP to 5,500 BP before present. So this is the intense interaction between South India, Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka as a maritime hub, how it interacted with Southeast Asia. Now, if you understand that, it is very easy for us to project how do we do this, reimagine and reconnect, given the current parameters of economy, trade, shipping, IT, and everything. I mean, this is not very very difficult task. That is what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Very well said. First, let us clear the picture. And then, based on that new, clear, confident image, reimagine what the future would be for the Indo-Pacific maritime routes. How about you? How do you look at it?
It's a great question. You had mentioned the Northeast Indian states. Excuse me. Some research that I've done on the Brahmaputra River Basin is an idea that comes to me. Essentially, that this river, the Brahmaputra, it's the 5th largest river in the world by flow. But when you look at other river systems like the Amazon or the Nile, they have water management schemes, water management agreements. But the Brahmaputra does not. And you have some of the most important stakeholders of that river. India, China, Bangladesh, Bhutan is also a stakeholder. The river doesn't travel through it, but it is a stakeholder of the basin. So that's one idea that in terms of, we're talking about reimagining, ambitious goals. Can these countries get together and try to come up with some sort of a water management agreement or accord, even a memorandum of understanding, starting at the most minimum. And I was very grateful in the past week to travel to the Northeast to visit Guwahati, and I heard there really grassroots level perspectives on the river, the erosion, the flooding that takes place, but also the source of life and culture and inspiration that comes from the river. And there's been some policy progress. I think in India, the Inland Waterways Authority has declared the Brahmaputra as National Waterways 2. So there's definitely been some progress in terms of trying to envision a scheme where these rivers, at least downriver, is navigable, benefiting the Northeast, benefiting India and Bangladesh relations. So I wonder if now is the time. India is acceding to the presidency of the G20, and the Prime Minister has talked about setting an ambitious agenda on the global stage, and you think about the impacts of climate change. Also China and the US have recently decided to restart climate talks. This is despite the significant competition that takes place between the United States and China. And we have the backdrop of COP27. So is this a time to reimagine the types of connectivity that can take place with the Northeast Indian states in the Bay of Bengal and come up with some sort of water management scheme, whether it's a formal Brahmaputra Basin Commission, or maybe it's something like just a memorandum of understanding, or even below that, just having some dialogues where all of the river stakeholders get together and scientists can conduct exchanges and visits to each other's territory. But I think we need to start imagining that.
Very important. It's a direct compliment to the organizers of this wonderful confluence that this is the right time to set the narrative, to put the pressure on the policymakers and request them that along with historical and cultural and trade and commercial, even geographical reconnection is as important as it should be. Thank you so much, all 4 of you. And we still have 10 minutes to have some food for thoughts before we move towards food for body. Would invite question one by one, and we'll let the recipient answer. The forum is open for next 10 minutes. Any questions to any of us? Could we have the audience lights on, please, if possible, so that we could see? Please identify yourself. Yeah, they are putting a focus on.
Good day. I am T.K. Sinha, career group.
Could you just keep the mic near to your...
Is it okay? Is it okay?
Yes.
Good day. I am T.K. Sinha, a career bureaucrat. If I am allowed to recollect history, then we can see that Mahendra and Sanghamitra were sent to Ceylon. They actually maritime, they sent to Ceylon. Sanghamitra and Mahendra were sent to Ceylon by Ashoka. So this is not for the establishing kingdom there, just to reconnect with the people, reconnect with that country. But we know the history. If we recollect also the one Bengali poet, Amader Chele Bijoy Singho Longa Korea Joy. There is one poetry like this. So I am not going for that. I only want to impress two things here. Just trade, religion, culture, whatever may be the area of activity for this reconnect, reimagine, we must actually take into the canvas the great characters of the artisans, peasantry, and the workers. If they are not involved, if it is restricted only amongst the elite class, only among the celebrities, then actually the fruitful activity will never happen, never take place.
Thank you so much, sir, for echoing what we just discussed in the last 45 minutes. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, if any specific questions, of course, suggestions are always welcome.
Hello, I've been trying to speak from the previous session. I'm Professor Srimati Mukherjee from Presidency University, and I teach in the Department of Performing Arts. Vis-a-vis what one of your speakers said about Indonesia being a Muslim country, yet there being pervasive Indian influence there. I mean, wayang kulit is a form of shadow theater that I think is still vibrant in Java, in parts of Java. And it now has a range of about 400-something characters, many of which are extrapolations from the original Mahabharata text. But what I really want to say is that Islam came to Indonesia, I think, in 1000 AD, if I'm not wrong. The period from 1st century AD to 1000 AD is the period of Indian influence, when missionaries and traders and intellectuals somehow, through trading, etc., went to Southeast Asia. Vishnu and Shiva were very important deities. Kings had constructed images, sculpture modeled on Shiva and Vishnu. So, and the Ramayana, it was definitely, and also the Buddhist, the Panji cycle of stories. And,
very well said. Actually, I was trying to avoid the spiritual and the religious connection between India and the Indo-Pacific, because it's a vast subject, but very rightly said. Just to a quick note on it, we need to learn, the modern India, the new current generation needs to learn a lot from Indonesia, the way they have been able to separate and keep aside the religion, the culture, and the lifestyle from each other. And all these three are very distinct in that part of Asia. So that's a beauty we all can learn from. Mr. Datta was, we'll take the last one.
It's not the last. I just want to make a very quick comment on to what Nilanti said about having countries talk about our shared rivers. You would be happy to know that we have initiated a dialogue between the countries. It's been running for the third generation, third edition, we just finished last few months ago, called Nadi. So Nadi means rivers. Nadi also means our common pulse, the pulse of energy, culture, civilization, spirituality, all of that. And also it stands for natural allies in development and interdependence. So just to let you know that we have something going on that. That's all.
Am I allowed to ask one question?
Yes, we'll take this as the last question.
So I am Professor Shomojit Roy, again from Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. It was a wonderful panel discussion. I just wanted to have your comment, because
right now we are slowly moving towards city-states and city civilizations, because cities are becoming more important than the federal states, and the federal structure also embraces this very reality. How are we poised, or how you are thinking to capitalize on this and connect or increase the connectivity and mobility beyond the cities or in between the cities, which are contributing or going to contribute a major share and redefine the geopolitical and economic scenario or landscape of the world, if not of this region? Thank you very much.
I'll request Sifra to take this, because you come from another very vibrant city called Mumbai.
Yeah. That's an excellent question. It's a reality that cities are the powerhouses and engines for growth. I mean, there's no two words about it. And a city like Mumbai, I'm sure like Calcutta and Delhi, we have a big metropolitan region around it. Bombay or Mumbai is no longer an island city. It's a city that whose influence it's not just a metropolitan region, but goes even beyond that. It's a reality that cities are here to stay. I mean, we'd like the hinterlands also to grow at the same space. And I think there is a great amount of change in the last 10 years in terms of connectivity, in terms of digital, in terms of telecommunications, even with the Hinterland Connect. But geopolitically and on the global stage, I think cities are going to be playing a very, very important role. Because even at the COP, you always have the cities. Even at G20, the cities are represented. And speaking for Mumbai, we have been, at Gateway House, we've been pitching for an empowered mayor. Because what happens is that our chief minister speaks for the city. We need to have our mayor, who is actually the head of the richest municipality in India, to really be out there on these kind of forums to speak for Mumbai. So, I mean, I can't speak for Kolkata, I don't know what the situation is, but for Mumbai, I know that we are pitching for an empowered mayor, just like the American mayors and in other countries which they have.
Thank you so much. Quick, should we? Let's let the audience decide. It's 1:48. Okay, please. Yes, ma'am. Could you just...
that there should... This is Meenakshi Mishra, Director ICCR. I just wanted to make a small suggestion regarding this Bali Jatra. When we plan to have the cultural exchanges during this period, I must share that this is a big trade fair. Okay, at the moment, the traders from all over the country is participating in this trade fair. Why not inviting the participation to make it an international trade fair? Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful suggestion. I think it was a very clear conversation and very easy flow of ideas. We tried to do Samudra Manthan of thoughts in as much clarity as possible. Lots of initiatives and lots of skills, lots of opportunities and possibilities have been discussed about how we can reimagine. I would conclude and pass it on the microphone to Sadhana ji with one last note and request to especially the scholars, the young generation back there. Now we will end up for...
excuse me.
We will break... We will... Yes, somebody from the audience?
Yes. Here I am.
We could discuss one-on-one over lunch.
No, actually, all of the representatives are there. So I had a suggestion.
Your good name, please?
My name is Nilanjana Chaudhary. I'm a software engineer. But the suggestion is absolutely different from my subject. That is, all these island nations have their own indigenous technique of development of textile. we have said the dance drama was there about textile, and India's technique of textile development and creating textile is well known. But there are some forms of textile development using natural dyes are there in every country. For example, batik has come from Indonesia itself. Recently, I was reading about shibori of Japan. Only one very elderly expert is left. So the people who are proficient in these techniques are washing away. So I somehow forced my talk.
Very well noted point, ma'am.
And this should be.
Textile Connect is, of course, a very important topic we need to think about, and we should and we will. So, henceforth, whenever you eat an Indian delicacy, please try to go into the history and the roots of it, and 90% of Indian cuisine has some cross-cultural connect. So, with that, bon appetit.
No, we have a little ceremony before that. I request Ms. Melinda Pavek, Consul General, U.S. Consulate in Kolkata, to kindly come on the stage and felicitate the chair and the panel. Chairing the session was Mr. Makaran Shukla. And our panelists were Sumit Nakandala, Nilati Samarnaike, Sifra Lenin, Lalatendu Das Mahapatra. And for their felicitation, I would invite the artists of Yatra, the flowing narrative also. Ma'am, we have felicitations for the artists. We have to felicitate the artists of Yatra. Please come on stage. Please come on stage. Doesn't matter. Come on stage. Where are the calls?
The artists did half of our job. They conveyed it through the most powerful medium, that is performing arts, what we actually wanted to discuss and share with you.
After the presentations of the Uttariyas, we'll have a group photograph of all the panelists and the artists. And for that, I request Mr. Sabya Datta to also join us on the stage. Oh. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a break for lunch. Please be back for the post-lunch session, which starts at 2:45. Please try and make it 5 minutes before that so that we can start our post-lunch session on time. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.